Hello, and welcome to Premier TV. I'm Jill Jacinto, the Mercer Premier Digital Platform Manager. We are excited to offer you this exclusive live stream as part of your membership in the newly launched Technology Industry Digital Community. On today's Premier Talk, we are joined by Marianne Glutz, who is the Program Manager and Research Lead for Mercer's Technology Industry team. She's here to share insights from the team's latest research, which will be available in Q1 of 2019. During our chat, if you have any questions or comments, make sure to type them into the comment thread below. So Marianne, before we dive in, can you share a little bit about your team, your previous research, and more about this research study?
Sure, I'd love to. Hi, everyone. As Jill mentioned, I am the Technology Industry Program Manager. And so I help with a lot of our research and driving that effort. So last year, we kicked off our technology industry research series called Leading Through Disruption. So this really focuses on identifying and understanding forces that are driving disruption in the technology industry. And then what we do is kind of take a people lens to that so we can really understand what the human implications are and what this means for HR organizations and leaders within the tech industry as well. So within the last year, we've released 2 papers. So the first one really highlights the 3 forces of disruption and the fundamental shifts in the tech industry. The 3 shifts that we tend to talk about are pervasive digitalization, exponential technologies, and speed at scale. And so we really lay out how technology enterprises can lead through disruption by recognizing these key forces that are driving change. So we can uncover some of the transformations that are necessary to prepare for the future of work. Our second paper that we released this year is called Building Tomorrow's Talent Model. And this is where we talk about the shifts in the industry that are driving the need for new talent models. And we provide some insights and recommendations on how to build a talent model that's future ready based on some of the disruptive factors that we talk about in the first paper. So those are available on the Premier site too. So if you have any questions or need to access those, please let us know.
Thank you, Marianne. So your latest research focuses on building an innovative, driven workplace. Can you share why you focused heavily on cultivating innovation in the workplace?
Yeah, that's a good question. So disruptive innovation is fundamentally changing how we design, build, and serve customers in the tech industry. And innovation is really the key to leading the way. And I don't think that would really surprise people to hear that. But just a few stats from CB Insights. They produced a paper on high-performing companies and had a paper on the state of innovation. So a few things that came out of their paper is that these high-performing companies are 5 times more likely to build a culture of innovation across every business function. They invest more in disruptive projects than lower performing companies. And they also have 2 times more effective idea generation than lower performing companies. So there's no question that innovation is the key to leading in the tech industry. But how an organization cultivates this and drives this innovation culture in the workplace is easier said than done, especially when we're thinking about more legacy tech firms, especially hardware companies that are moving to software companies. So we really wanted to explore this idea, is how do you cultivate this in a company? And that's really been the crux of our study. So we started about 2 months ago. And what we did was we surveyed 250 around there companies, and we conducted over 20 direct interviews. And so this consisted of tech industry HR leaders, technologists, and product and customer facing folks, because we really wanted to get a cross-sectional view around what makes disruptive technology companies tick, and answer the question, what are innovation-driven workplaces in tech doing differently? So the 3 questions we were trying to answer more directly was, how can companies evolve work practices and employee experience to foster innovation? We also wanted to understand what the more innovative companies are doing. We get asked that all the time. So that was a big part of our research. And then we wanted to look at how people strategies can help or hinder business readiness to drive results. And then finally, we just wanted to understand what are the trade-offs necessary in order to lead through disruption and build a more innovative company and take that people lens to that.
That's really interesting. So how exactly did you differentiate the innovative workplaces from the others?
Sure, that's a good question. So I'll talk a little bit more about this once we keep going through the session, but just to kind of speak a little bit broadly, we did develop an index based on prior research that we've done where we designated the innovation-driven work. We designated this concept innovation-driven workplaces. I'll sometimes refer to that as IDWs just because it's a little bit of a mouthful. But these are companies that scored significantly higher on several elements. Some of them include customer focus, innovation-driven culture, fast-paced change, skill readiness for new technologies, and then competitive rewards and resource efficiency for innovative work. So those were the main components of how we really differentiated between innovation-driven companies and non-innovation-driven companies. Mm-hmm. So, and we also noticed that the tech disruptors or the innovation-driven workplaces, as I'll refer to them in this conversation, are leading the industry, and they're growing and adding business capabilities at a much faster pace than peers. For instance, our research showed that they're expanding their product portfolio and making significant workforce increases, and that's just in the last 18 months alone. And so when we talk about significant workforce increases, that's 20% or more. So pretty significant jump just in the last 18 months alone. So pretty interesting. These companies are doing very different things, and we'll kind of dive into what that means in terms of people programs and policies as well.
Mm-hmm. They are doing very different things. Can you share a brief summary of the findings and then tell us how the most innovative companies differ from the rest?
Sure, yeah, let's dig into that a little bit more. So I do have some slides that I put together that I wanted to share, and I'll share 3 insights. And so there is a lot more data and meat behind what I'm about to share, and this will all be included in the paper. Jill mentioned that that's coming out in Q1 of 2019, but I wanted to at least share some of the insights that we found, and then kind of talk about what that means for HR leaders or just leaders in the business in general. So on to the first insight that I want to talk about. So we identified 5 distinct elements that we see set the disruptors or the innovation-driven workplaces apart from the rest. So these elements show that these companies have distinct organizational and people practices. So let's kind of dive into what those are. What we learned is that innovation-driven workplaces design workplace experience that foster innovation by placing employees at the center. So through these 5 distinct elements, let's kind of unwrap those a little bit. So the first one is all about the purpose-driven vision and culture. So this focuses on rewarding innovation, engagement, collaboration, and this speed and comfort with failure. The next component are workforce skills and behaviors that will enable tomorrow's workforce to operate in this augmented and human-in-the-loop future. So more human-machine teaming and enabling their people to work in such a way. The third component, people programs and processes that are flexible and scale learning across the enterprise, and promote competitive and inclusive rewards. The next piece is organizational architecture. And what we mean by that is that companies are able to move tasks and decisions closest to the information, and they reward innovative behaviors and reduce the internal friction that enables team collaboration and risk-taking. So a big part of this is getting blockers out of the way and empowering people and employees to get their job done in an easier way, and building the fabric of the company, and whether that's through technology or through management principles. It's really about making the experience easier for the employee by putting out the right organizational architecture. And then the last topic, something that's really important too, is digital workplace. So this is all about building intelligent applications and innovative practices that encourage autonomy, experimentation, and human-machine collaboration too. So that's kind of a broad strokes of the 5 dimensions that really differentiate these innovation-driven tech workplaces. So I will unpack these a bit and kind of talk about the underlying people and organizational practices that kind of live in these 5 elements. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff on here, but as we go around the circle, starting with culture and purpose, the IDWs are significantly ahead in the industry when it comes to creating a culture of experimentation and failing fast. So part of that has to do with leadership. So we notice that leaders at these companies provide a sense of psychological safety, and they're 3 times more likely to protect employees from adverse consequences when innovation or project work fails for any reason. And they also, if we move to the next one, create a learning at will environment. So by a wide margin, these IDW employees, the people that work for innovation-driven companies, rated training investments, opportunities to learn, and peer learning as valuable and ahead of the rest of the industry. So what's interesting is that employees at innovation-driven workplaces identified opportunities to learn as the #1 reason they stay in their job. So I think this goes back to the culture piece, and these companies have really set themselves apart by creating a culture that values learning at will. So I think that really differentiates these companies too. And when you look at the companies that don't fall into the innovation-driven workplaces, opportunities to learn tended to fall a little bit lower on the list too. So not in the top 3. So moving on to the next one, when it comes to people, processes, and programs, these companies focus on initiatives that supercharge employees. So what do we mean by that? They're much more likely to provide flexible work arrangements, personalized and inclusive benefits, and wealth generation opportunities too. A lot more in that one. We have lots of data on that one, but just it was hard to put everything in one slide. But those are kind of the broad brushstrokes for that. And then we also see that IDWs are significantly ahead of the industry when it comes to creating organizational architectures that empower employees. And what we found is that these companies have KPIs that reward collaboration and speed, and that's compared to operational efficiency. So they're more focused on working together and doing it quickly, and failing fast is okay, as we mentioned before. And they cultivate a teaming environment. Employees working for these companies rated team and peers as the #1 reason they stay in their job. And that's overcompensation, which we find particularly interesting because compensation tends to be #1 when we look more broadly across industries and companies. We saw this in our survey. So if we look at everyone who took our survey, compensation and benefits always appears to be #1 as the reason people are staying at their job. But if you peel it back, the most innovative companies, the people that work for them, actually tend to put people that they work with as their #1 reason they stay at their job. We've also seen this in our, Mercer does an annual survey, the talent trends. And so we always see comp and ben as the #1 too, but I think this is just an interesting finding that it's much more about comp and ben, and we'll dig into that a little bit more too when we get to the second insight. So the last one here So IDWs are also ahead when it comes to digital workplaces that really fuel transparency and hyper productivity, as I talked about earlier. And so they just do a far better job making HR business data accessible, and they really prioritize a digital work environment. We saw that this was the #1 item when we asked employees where they would devote the most organizational resources, and the more innovative companies, digital work environment was #1. Which I think is really interesting. Digital work environment was also important for companies that were not a innovation-driven workplace, but tended to be #2 or 3 on their list. So, I mean, this concept really enables employees to be more autonomous, move faster, because it just removes the unnecessary blockers in your day-to-day work, and it empowers them to get information they need to do their job and do it well too. So, and just to kind of end on that note, it's really about making employees' lives easier. So, entering things like time into a mobile app, digital collaboration tools, so Google Docs, Slack, or Office 360. There's probably a lot more that I could mention here, but that's another topic for another day. But this just allows teams to be more agile, work iteratively, and part of it too is just about nudging employees too regarding health and well-being, and setting reminders for things like mental breaks, mindfulness, and walks too. So it's a lot more than just collaboration tools. It's building an environment and platforms that, again, make an employee's life easier at work. And as I mentioned earlier, there's certainly a lot more data I can cover here and share on this topic, but hopefully this gives you a sense of what really sets these companies apart from the rest. And I do want to spend some time on the other insights that we have from our research. So let's dive into the next one. I kind of touched on this in our first insight, but our second insight focuses on the fact that the value proposition for employees in tech is much bigger than building a competitive rewards package. So for instance, employees at the innovation-driven workplaces reported that in addition to competitive and fair total rewards, things like working with good people, impact of work, and the company's product portfolio are really important to them. So let me kind of illustrate that for you. So we heard a lot of things through our interviews, and also took some themes out of the survey as well. And I wanted to share a little bit about what we heard. So as you can see, what I'm showing here, collaboration, products, nature of work, and digital workplace were what we saw as talent magnets. It doesn't mean that compensation isn't important. It's still a big important factor. Again, it's #1. But I think there are other components that are really shaping what employees value in tech in particular. So just to kind of hit the headlines here. So collaboration and working with good people, inclusivity came up again and again, not only in our survey, but in the interviews as something that employees in tech value. We see this more prominently in the innovation-driven workplaces. We also heard this across the board from a lot of other tech employees as well. So another big one too, which I feel like isn't talked about a lot, but is very important to employees, particularly that are working in tech functions and product-facing functions, was about product portfolio and technology. So I heard a great story from an engineer that was working for a hardware company, and he said he ended up leaving that company to work for an innovative semiconductor company because he believed their technology strategy and their product were going somewhere. And he saw the vision and he understood it. And he thought that they're really taking advantage of this next gen technology, whereas his current employer wasn't doing that. So there are plenty of these stories that we heard. And we even heard just from HR leaders, one in particular, that they were able to attract talent because of their technology vision and technology stack. And they to candidates and to employees, they thought that the company was going in a very innovative direction. And I think it's important to mention that this HR leader that we spoke to, he's not probably part of the innovation-driven workplaces group, if you will, but they're kind of making that transition. So you can see that they're able to attract talent based on the product portfolio that they're building, because that's really something that they learned that tech employees value. And so, excuse me, another theme that we heard a lot was around the nature of work and opportunities to shape unique experiences. So while in many of the interviews, people shared how much they valued learning new concepts and skills, they didn't always have the time to devote to these activities, even at the more innovative workplaces where there's strong culture around learning. Most of it was on the job or through rotational roles versus things like on-demand trainings or more formal learning opportunities. So the last thing that I wanted to mention with the digital workplace, I talked about this a few times, especially in the first insight, but this was really rated highly across innovation-driven companies. So functions like HR, technology, and the more customer-oriented roles all thought that this was a valuable thing for their company to devote organizational resources and people towards. And so I don't think it's a surprise either that employees expect their workplace to kind of mirror the consumer experience that they have. And that's enterprise digital workplace takes a little bit longer to implement. But I just kind of think of the recent college grads, because we've worked with a lot of interns recently, and they're so used to working with collaboration tools at school. And so just thinking about transitioning to a company with more legacy tools, I think it tends to be frustrating for them in a step back. And it's a small thing, but I think this theme kind of brings it to life where, people, especially newer generations, are expecting to work with workplace technology that really enables them to do work easily and with new age technology. So I touched on topics and pieces of how the value proposition for tech is evolving and what matters most. So I wanted to show you how we translated this into what we call tomorrow's employee value proposition for tech. And I don't want to belabor this, but I kind of wanted to show you that on the right, we see what matters more, and on the left is what matters a little bit less. So this is more of a summary of what we've already discussed, but I think one of our big lessons learned is that we have to be very holistic in how we approach when we're building our company's value proposition. So it's not just about comp and benefits and perks. I've said that a couple times, but I just want to make sure to drive that point home. There's so many other components like culture and experiences, and those really have to be driven in partnership with HR and business leaders too, and technology leaders. And so it's a little bit harder than maybe some things towards the bottom, but all of these things together are really important. And especially when, the vision and culture, they really have to cascade through the experiences and really the rewards that are offered too. So it's really about walking the walk, talking the talk. And it's not just about having, fancy mission and brand, but also reflecting those in the behaviors and culture and day-to-day work as well. So let's move to the final insight I wanted to share. It actually ties nicely to this pyramid here that you see on the screen. Okay, so we also found that the innovation-driven workplaces have more strategic alignment on people priorities across functions like HR, business, technology. And a big part of that starts with the top part of the value proposition chain that I showed on the previous slide, culture and purpose. So we saw that these more innovation-driven workplaces put more focus and priority on this culture and purpose piece. So let's dive a little bit into that. So I'm just to kind of give you an idea of what this chart means. So on the left-hand side, you see the less innovative companies, and the right-hand side, you're seeing those innovation-driven workplaces that I've been talking about. And the circles represent HR, and the squares represent business and tech, and the lines between them just to show the difference in how many, the percentage of organizational resources that they said should be devoted to such people priorities. And you can see on the right in the key, the 5 people priorities that we talked about were digital workplace, collaborative culture, reskilling, working in new areas, and differentiated rewards. So when it comes to top priorities, HR and business are fully aligned at IDWs on the top 2 priorities, and not so much in the less innovative companies too. So we did think it was interesting that these companies that are innovation driven, so what they valued highest was collaborative culture and digital workplace. So I think, again, this nicely ties to the employee value proposition triangle that we showed, where culture is the kind of the key, right? And that requires alignment, not just in HR, but across the business too, because multiple people contribute to creating that culture and vision, and also orchestrating it throughout the organization. So some takeaways here. So what fundamentally drives strategic alignment on people priorities? So we see this as a function of culture. We've been talking a lot about that today. So this is shaped by the pace in which business moves and how agile HR needs to be. So one thing we gathered from our interviews was that when business and technology teams drive a culture with this beginner's mindset, how do we solve business problems in new ways versus using the same tools and processes and doing the things doing the way we've always done them kind of mindset? At the more innovative companies, the HR mindset was similar to that of the business, and these functions are building operating models that are more about fit for purpose compared to designing around operational efficiencies. So there'll be a lot more in our paper about this in particular and how you drive alignment. But those were kind of the 3 insights that I wanted to share today, and can't wait to share more in the paper and really build this out for you.
Thank you, Marianne. You've definitely been able to give us a variety of data here. I personally can't wait to read the full research report, but I wanted to know, what did you think was the most surprising or interesting thing you learned from this research?
That's a good question. Let's see. So throughout the year, we've had a lot of discussions with tech companies and non-tech companies too, on evolving their employee value proposition. And I think we find so much focus and priority put on total rewards because we're constantly asked by clients, what are the most innovative tech companies doing in rewards? That's a common question. And while I agree this is important, it's a component of what employee and candidates care about. And in a lot of ways, it's becoming table stakes too. So rewards are kind of just some high compensation, fair compensation is becoming table stakes in tech. So how you really differentiate your firm in what you do really comes down to, the harder piece, which is culture and people, which is something that we saw through our survey and study, that the most innovative people that are working for the most innovative companies, those are the things that they value. And so that's why a lot of our research has focused on how you cultivate that. So I think that's been maybe not the most surprising thing, but really the most interesting thing too, is that how do we create this more holistic view into a proposition that really resonates with the new age tech workforce?
Well, the research is definitely interesting, and I love how you laid out what differentiates people practice of innovation-driven workplaces. But how can we make this real for the people on the call? And will there be any recommendations on how companies can become an innovation-driven workplace?
Yeah, that's a good question too. And obviously we want to do much more than share insights and data points from the research. And so really where we're going in terms of next steps of this paper is building out the levers and recommendations that will help you build an innovation-driven workplace. We have this great framework that Sheila Sukumaran, who is our global technology industry leader, her and I have built this framework that really outlines where you are in your journey as a company, because we recognize that organizational context is so important to starting in your innovation journey, right? So she'll talk a little bit about that in an upcoming webcast, which I think will be really interesting because I mean, every company is in a different place. So we like to talk to companies about where they are and where they want to be and what levers are going to really drive the most value. So that's not only a next step in our research, but it's something that Sheila would love to share before the paper is released next year.
Great. Well, can you share the next steps and let everyone know when the full research will be released? I know I'm waiting for
it. Yes, so we'll be releasing the full report in Q1 of 2019. So it's a little bit broad. So before March is the goal, but you can see that we're doing some pre-socialization. So if you are interested in learning more, we definitely encourage you to reach out to us. Something that we do as part of our team is we do provide market insight sessions, which we are planning throughout 2019. So if you're interested in putting together a session that we kind of bring some of the insights from this report and do a working session, we'd love to hear from you and kind of talk about where you can start your journey, especially if you're not really sure where to start or who should be involved. And I think that's a great opportunity to work with our team. And again, I did want to reiterate that next week, our global technology industry leader, Sheila Sukumaran, is going to be hosting a live stream where she'll talk a little bit more about that journey for HR innovation and where to start based on your specific needs and organizational context. She's a great speaker, really smart lady, and has worked with a ton of tech companies. So really encourage you guys to join in and tune in for that one. It'll be a good one.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Marianne, thank you for providing us with this exclusive preview of your upcoming research. It's very fascinating. To those of you tuning in, thank you for joining us on Premier TV, where global perspectives are delivered by leading experts. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and encourage you to continue the discussion by adding your thoughts and questions in the comment thread below and within your technology group. This is a space for you to connect with your global peers and leverage the power of collective thinking. As Marianne mentioned, Sheila Sukumaran will be joining us next week on December 6th to discuss Leading Through Disruption, Managing Your HR Innovation Journey. We'll be sending out more information on that shortly, but if you want to sign up right now, please email premiercommunitysupport@mercer.com or add your RSVP in the chat below. Please tune in to other Premier panels, talks, and fireside chats to learn firsthand what new opportunities are on the horizon for your organization today. As a reminder, you can access all episodes of Premier TV on the Mercer Premier digital platform. Thank you.